I'm about to share with you an incredibly detailed and unfiltered account of the chaos and emotional turmoil that erupted around my sister's wedding, a story filled with family drama, raw emotions, and moments that I never imagined would unfold. To begin, let me explain that my 26-year-old sister, my older sister, F28, ended up making me the maid of honor for her wedding, which is set to take place in just about a month and a half, while my 21-year-old half-sister, F21, is throwing a full-blown fit over the situation. Now, if you're new here and you appreciate hearing real stories like this, please make sure to subscribe, like, and share for the support of my channel. Your encouragement truly means the world to me and helps me keep sharing these raw and honest moments with you all. To give you some background, my sister Laura and I were raised solely by our mom during the early years of our lives, roughly the first 5 years, without the presence of a dad. It was just the two of us and our mother, living together in a modest, cramped apartment furnished mostly with second-hand items that barely made our home look complete. Yet, despite the hardships and limited means, we found joy in the simple fact that we always had a roof over our heads and food on the table. Life was far from luxurious, but we learned early on the value of frugality and resourcefulness. Then, everything changed when our mom met my stepdad, an absolutely awesome guy who brought not only stability but also a new lease on life. After they married, we welcomed our little sister, Carrie, into the mix. With my stepdad's excellent job, our world transformed almost overnight. We moved from that tiny apartment into a big, beautiful house that, by any standard, was a mansion in comparison. Suddenly, Christmases and birthdays were filled with generous gifts and all the trappings of a more comfortable life. Carrie grew up in this world of abundance, while Laura and I, though we also experienced those nice gifts, never forgot what it felt like to have very little. Even now, our mom remains fiercely frugal, and our love for thrifting and DIY projects persists as a cherished part of who we are. In many ways, Laura and I have maintained our independent perspectives on money and simplicity, setting us apart from Carrie, who has always been a bit spoiled, not in the sense of throwing a tantrum and demanding a new car from daddy, but in her own unique way, like insisting on a $500 name-brand birthday cake and then pouting for days if things don't go her way. It still boggles my mind that she continues to live with mom and dad without holding down a job, and they seem content with that arrangement, but hey, that's just how things are in our family. As time went on, love and excitement entered our lives when Laura's boyfriend of 6 years proposed last year. Naturally, we were all over the moon about it because he is a genuinely great guy, and we all hold him in high regard. In the midst of that joyful engagement, Laura presented me, along with her friends Charlotte and our youngest sister Carrie, with a beautifully wrapped box containing earrings. The earrings weren't ordinary. One set read, "Will you be a bridesmaid?" addressed to Charlotte, while the set given to me boldly declared, "Maid of Honor." The excitement was palpable as we all began brainstorming ideas, discussing potential color schemes, cake flavors, and every little detail that would make the wedding unique. Initially, the plan was to wait a year so the couple could save up and truly decide on their dream celebration. But life, as it often does, had other plans. 4 months ago, Laura announced that she was pregnant, and while our entire family was ecstatic about the upcoming addition, Carrie's reaction was markedly subdued. Almost as if she had no interest in the joyous news, Carrie barely uttered a word, her silence hanging heavily over the room. Soon after, Laura explained that she and Alan, her soon-to-be husband, decided to push forward with wedding plans, aiming for a celebration in just 2 short months with around 30 to 40 guests, enough to ensure an intimate and truly memorable event before any changes might come with the arrival of the baby. Originally, Alan's generous offer of $10,000 was meant to help fund their dream wedding, but given the new circumstances, they asked if they could instead allocate most of that money toward buying a house they had been eyeing, and Alan agreed without much fuss. Thus, Charlotte, Laura, Mom, and I plunged headfirst into frantic wedding planning, a process that was both exhilarating and stressful. The only sour note was Carrie's persistent indifference. Whenever the conversation turned to wedding details, she would either bury herself in her phone or dismiss the planning entirely. At one point, Laura had to gently confront her and request that she contribute more ideas, and though Carrie eventually agreed to try, her cooperation was half-hearted at best. For example, when we were headed to the dollar store to pick up a few decorations, Carrie scoffed loudly, exclaiming that dollar store decorations are so tacky. Despite her objections, we continued on with our plans. Later, when we asked if she would help create handmade invitations, a project meant to add a personal touch to the event, she complained again, remarking that the invitations would look as if they had been crafted by a bunch of preschoolers, and then she simply walked away. These moments of blatant disregard for our collective efforts only fueled the brewing tension. Not long after, we found ourselves shopping for bridesmaid dresses, an activity that would soon spark yet another major dispute. Laura informed us that we could pick any dress we liked, provided it was blue, because she envisioned a simple, cohesive look for the bridal party, and importantly, we would be paying for our own dresses. So, Mom, Charlotte, and I headed over to H&M, where we discovered a selection of stunning blue summer maxi dresses in a variety of styles, from delicate lace designs to breezy floral cotton options. Laura was absolutely thrilled with our choices, deeming them perfect for the occasion. Naturally, Carrie was the sole dissenter. She insisted on purchasing an extravagant $2,000 designer bridesmaid gown that she had found online. My mom immediately shot down the idea, calling it ridiculous by comparison. After all, even Laura's dress didn't come anywhere close to that price. True to form, Carrie continued to whine and protest. In a surprising turn of events, Mom eventually relented, and we all visited a fancy bridal shop. There, Carrie wasted no time in picking out a pink blush gown that she declared she had to wear, even though it was a cool $1,000 and, crucially, not even blue like the dresses chosen for the rest of us. Adding insult to injury, my sister went on to say that blue was the stupidest color for a bridesmaid dress, because, in her opinion, we don't even live near the ocean, a comment that only deepened the rift. We left the store with Carrie sulking and pouting, and Mom took the opportunity to lecture her, reminding her that this was a frugal wedding held in our own backyard with only 30 or 40 guests, meaning there was absolutely no need for an exorbitant designer dress. Fast forward a few days, and Carrie announced that she had found a dress in her closet that she planned to wear. It was blue, after all, which we thought was fantastic. However, when we arrived at Mom and Dad's house to see her, Carrie made a dramatic entrance, strutting and wearing her old high school prom dress. To be completely honest, that dress was a puffy ball gown bedazzled with jewels, a relic from her teenage years that, as with many things from high school, had long since lost its flattering fit. The dress was now so ill-fitting that her boobs were spilling out, and it looked anything but elegant. On top of that, she had adorned herself with a tiara encrusted with sparkling jewels, a piece she claimed to have bought solely for the wedding. At that moment, both Mom and Laura were left speechless, and I simply couldn't hold my tongue any longer. I snapped at her, telling Carrie in no uncertain terms that she couldn't possibly be serious. Wearing a dress that was even fancier than the bride's was one thing, but having her boobs spilling out combined with the absurdity of wearing a crown was utterly unacceptable. Who did she think she was? In response, Carrie defiantly crossed her arms and retorted, "I'm the maid of honor, of course I'm going to wear a crown." A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone processed her shocking declaration. Then, Laura intervened and clarified once and for all, "Maid of honor, I made it clear that I, Amy, am the maid of honor, and you, along with Charlotte, will serve as bridesmaids." This revelation sent Carrie into a full-blown meltdown. She began screeching, "What do you mean I'm not maid of honor? You told me I was. When you gave us those presents, I got earrings that said I am maid of honor." I wasn't sure if Carrie had genuinely confused the roles all along or if she had simply been in denial, neglecting to pay attention to the details that I had made crystal clear from the very start. Regardless, her reaction was nothing short of catastrophic, a meltdown so extreme that I had always thought such behavior was reserved only for movies or exaggerated Reddit posts about BrideZillas. Yet here it was, Carrie screaming, crying, ripping off her crown, and stomping around the room as Dad rushed down to assess the chaos. Amid her incoherent blubbering, she proclaimed that Laura's wedding was all wrong. She claimed that the $10,000 should be used for a proper, extravagant wedding instead of spending it on what she derided as that ugly brick house that Laura and Alan had chosen. She further lambasted the idea of Laura marrying while pregnant, adding hurtful insults about how pregnant women look like fat swans in wedding dresses, and went on again about how blue was a dumb color because we didn't live anywhere near the ocean. At that point, it seemed as though she was just spouting random nonsense. Dad tried desperately to calm her down, but then, in one final outburst, she screamed that if she couldn't be made maid of honor, then nobody could, and that she wouldn't be attending the wedding at all. The room was filled with silence as Laura broke down in tears, and I, seething with anger, felt an overwhelming urge to smack that little witch so hard that her crown would never sit on her head again. Before I could do anything, however, Laura cut in and said, "Fine, you can be maid of honor, you win." In an instant, Carrie's tears subsided, a small smile played on her lips, and she retreated to her room. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad began arguing, Dad insisting that nothing could control the behavior of a 20-year-old, while Laura dashed off to call Alan about possibly canceling the wedding. My anger escalated so much that I stormed into Carrie's room, only to find her casually on her laptop, ordering that ridiculous pink $2,000 dress. I was completely dumbfounded by her audacity. I couldn't even look her in the eye. I left without saying another word, overwhelmed by my own fury. Downstairs, Laura was inconsolable as she cried to her fiancé, and the air was filled with shouts and bickering from our parents, while Carrie remained content in her room, happily buying stupid crap because she had gotten her way. I have never felt such intense anger in my life. I wished Laura had more backbone. I would have told Carrie not to show up if she was going to act like that, but now I'm left confused and hurt, especially since Laura had simply handed over the title to her after that pathetic outburst. I felt betrayed and utterly lost about what to do next. Before I continue with the unfolding events, let me also mention that we live on a farm. Our beautiful, sprawling property covers approximately 6 acres of open space. This is where we're holding the wedding, a relaxed, backyard barbecue-style celebration with around 30 to 40 guests. In light of current concerns, the cooks preparing hot dogs and hamburgers are required to wear masks, and all our guests must do the same. We have hand sanitizer bottles placed on every table, and even a small tap by the side of our house that doubles as a makeshift sink for guests. I know many people aren't taking enough precautions these days, so I wanted to emphasize that we are doing our best to ensure everyone's safety. Personally, I'll be wearing my mask and constantly sanitizing my hands because I refuse to miss my sister's wedding under any circumstances. I simply pray that everything turns out fine, despite all the family drama. I decided to post an update about all of this. After all, I was shaming my sister for demanding the role of maid of honor instead of me, and I wanted to let everyone know what had happened that very afternoon. It had been 3 days since Carrie's meltdown, and I had spent that time digesting all the advice and opinions from those who reached out on Reddit and elsewhere. That morning, Alan, Laura's fiancé, called me early and asked if I could come over to see Laura because he was completely fed up with Carrie's behavior and insisted that we needed to take action immediately. I was relieved to know that I wasn't the only one who had reached my breaking point. When I arrived, I found Laura slumped on the couch in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess from days of not washing it, and it was clear from the look on her face and the tears staining her cheeks that she had been crying for several days straight. My heart broke at the sight, and she immediately apologized, confessing that she felt completely overwhelmed and didn't know what to do anymore. Alan suggested that the 3 of us, himself, Laura, and me, should sit down for an intervention to address everything. However, Laura quickly shut down the idea, insisting she couldn't handle any more yelling. I agreed wholeheartedly. The last thing Laura needed was to be bombarded with harsh words. After some back and forth, Laura finally decided that she would prefer to have a one-on-one conversation between Carrie and me, away from the prying ears of Mom, Dad, and even our other sister, Sue. Together, Laura and I made a list of key issues that needed addressing. Firstly, that it was completely unacceptable for Carrie to raise her voice at a pregnant woman under any circumstances. Secondly, that her blatant disrespect in criticizing every aspect of the wedding, from the decorations to the planning, was out of line. And finally, that her use of tears and tantrums in order to claim the title of maid of honor was simply not acceptable. I also took the opportunity to mention to Laura that Charlotte and I had been planning a fun bachelorette slumber party to celebrate her upcoming nuptials. Laura's face lit up with excitement at the idea, though I had to remind her that it was supposed to be a surprise, and that Carrie was originally invited. Given everything that had happened, I made it clear that I no longer wanted Carrie to be present at the slumber party, and I asked Laura if she was okay with replacing Carrie with another friend. Laura readily agreed, insisting that it would be better for everyone if Carrie was kept away for a while. Soon after our conversation, I headed over to Mom and Dad's house to speak with Carrie directly. The moment I walked in, Mom asked what I was doing there, and I explained that I needed to talk to Carrie alone about what had transpired. In a hushed tone, wearing her robe, Mom urged me to leave, insisting that since things had been resolved over the past 3 days, there was no need for further drama. I apologized, explaining that nothing had truly been resolved at all. Just then, Carrie appeared in the kitchen, clearly displeased, and asked, "What are you doing here?" Mom attempted to brush it off, saying something like, "Amy was just here to get something, but she's on her way out now." I couldn't let that lie stand. I told her, "No, that's not true. I'm here to talk to you about what happened the other day, just the 2 of us." Although Carrie's face was flushed red and she didn't seem thrilled about the idea, we moved to her bedroom to have a serious discussion. I began by firmly stating how utterly unacceptable it was for her to have raised her voice and screamed at a pregnant woman, emphasizing the harm that such behavior could inflict on the baby. Carrie immediately scoffed and retorted, "No, it isn't. Don't make up lies just to make me feel guilty." When I pressed her on which lies I was referring to, she dismissively said that the baby wouldn't be affected by raised voices because it didn't even know what was going on, basically accusing me of fabricating stories. At that point, I realized that arguing further with someone who wasn't willing to listen was pointless. I told her bluntly, whether pregnant or not, this is Laura's wedding, not yours. All of the name-calling, the screaming, and your harsh criticisms of every little detail are nothing but childish and completely unacceptable. I then reminded her of how she threw that tantrum just to try to claim the maid of honor position, arguing that if the roles were reversed, she would have lost her mind if I had ever dared to take away something that was rightfully hers. Carrie shot back, accusing me of acting pathetic and smelling of jealousy, even going as far as to claim that I was just envious that Laura had decided she wanted me. I firmly rejected her accusation, explaining that if Laura truly wanted me, she wouldn't have had to resort to such theatrics to claim the title. Instead, Laura had agreed to make Carrie the maid of honor in order to stop the constant fighting. Carrie then smugly declared that there was nothing I could do about it and that I should simply get over it. In response, I informed her that she was no longer welcome at the slumber party we had planned, and that neither my fiancé nor I would have her in our home until she apologized to me, Laura, and our parents for her outrageous behavior. At that moment, Mom suddenly burst through the door, clearly having overheard everything, and launched into a tirade. She claimed I had no right to ban Carrie from the slumber party or from my home, insisting that the only reason I was doing it was to get back at her. Mom accused me of stirring up unnecessary drama, pointing out that at least last time, Carrie hadn't intended to hurt anyone's feelings, whereas now I was doing it deliberately. It was then that Carrie began to cry, moaning about how I was constantly bullying her and that I was being unfair. Mom rushed over to comfort Carrie, rubbing her back and saying, "I know, honey, she's being very rude right now, but you didn't start anything." At that exact moment, I noticed my stepdad standing in the doorway. I turned to him and said, "Don't you see what's happening? Did she at least tell you she bought that stupid pink $2,000 dress?" Stepdad looked awkwardly between Mom, Laura, and me before finally muttering, "I think everyone's just stressed out right now. No one means what they say, sisters fight, and I'm sure by the end of the wedding, you'll all be best friends again." I'd had enough. I announced that I was leaving, and despite Mom's protests, I stormed out. As I walked away, I heard Carrie mutter that she didn't think she needed to apologize for anything. I left feeling hurt, angry, and with a pounding headache so intense that all I could think about was grabbing some Advil and a bottle of juice from the nearest convenience store. That's when I started to wonder if I'd crossed a line that I couldn't come back from. Now, if you're still with me through all this family drama, there's one more twist I need to share. I hadn't mentioned it before, but for context, Carrie has been dating a guy named Noah for about 6 months. Noah is 27, a hardcore Christian with a calm and cool demeanor, and I first met him when we were both taking classes at the city's university a couple of years ago. Over time, we became pals, and I got to know him well enough to see that he and Carrie share many common interests. Both of them are passionate about animals, with Noah often fostering them, and Carrie even considering a future in veterinary medicine. In early January, Noah moved back to our part of the city after landing a job as a pharmacist, and that's when his relationship with Carrie officially began. We were all on board with their relationship because Noah is a genuinely great person, someone whose Christian values shine through in everything he does. He's talked multiple times about how eager he is to get married and start a family as soon as possible, even mentioning that he hopes to be engaged by the end of the year. Carrie is his first serious relationship, and perhaps that's why he's so anxious to move forward quickly. One day, while I was out grabbing some Advil and juice, I unexpectedly ran into Noah at the pharmacy. He waved me over and, noticing the Advil, asked if I was feeling sick. I explained that it was just a throbbing headache brought on by all the wedding stress. He then mentioned, rather casually, that Carrie hadn't mentioned any wedding stress to him at all. In fact, she'd told him everything was going terrific. This revelation both surprised and angered me. I asked if it meant that she hadn't told him about the entire fiasco that had unfolded, and he admitted that he was completely unaware. I then quickly summarized the key highlights for him: her yelling, name-calling, the screaming, and, of course, her decision to choose her own dress against Laura's wishes, all culminating in her now being designated as maid of honor. Noah was taken aback, asking if I was sure that was really what happened, noting that Carrie had always hated yelling and wouldn't normally create such a scene. I confirmed that, unfortunately, it was all too true. I went as far as to request that if she ever talked to him about it, he should suggest that she see a therapist, maybe even consider medication for something like bipolar disorder, for all I knew. I made it clear that I was essentially done with her unless she apologized properly, and if I were him, I would seriously reconsider any commitment to her until she got her act together. Noah stood there silently, processing everything, and I eventually left. Later, when I returned home, my fiancé and Alan were playing video games and asked me what had happened. I recounted everything in detail, and both of them agreed that I was absolutely in the right, even applauding me for warning Noah later that evening. However, my actions weren't without consequence. I began receiving countless texts from both Carrie and Mom, all furious that I had mentioned anything to Noah, accusing me of doing it on purpose. In response, I chose not to engage further and ended up blocking their numbers for a while. As for Noah, Carrie seems to have that guy wrapped around her little finger. I honestly can't see him doing anything drastic because he seems oblivious to how spoiled and pouty she can be, though I worry that he might be missing some serious red flags. Despite everything, I still felt compelled to speak out. I wish I could say I feel empowered and like a new woman after all of this, but the truth is, I feel deeply hurt and betrayed, like there's a constant pressure in my chest and throat that just won't go away. In the midst of it all, Laura called me later that day to say that she really wanted me to remain her maid of honor. However, in an attempt to keep the peace, she decided to stick with Carrie for now. With a heavy heart, I told her that I would swallow my pride and my pain and continue to support my favorite sister in whatever decision she makes, and that I would love my new niece or nephew with all my heart, no matter what. I thanked everyone who had listened to my story so far, and if you have any advice or words of wisdom, please do share them. About 2 weeks after that intense conversation with Carrie, things continued to spiral in unexpected ways. I had since blocked Mom, Dad, and Carrie on everything, hoping that with time, things might settle down on their own. Unfortunately, that wasn't quite the case. One late evening, around 2 a.m., my fiancé and I were just relaxing and watching TV when my fiancé received a phone call from Carrie. It was odd because he had never blocked her number, nor Mom's, so at first, we ignored it, not wanting to deal with more drama in the middle of the night. However, after the initial call went unanswered, she called a second time and even left a voice message pleading for him to pick up the phone immediately due to an emergency. Concerned, my fiancé called her back, and all we could gather from her frantic tone was that something was seriously wrong with Mom. Without wasting another minute, we rushed over to the house, where Carrie greeted us and explained in a shaky voice that Mom was acting hysterically and that she wasn't sure what to do. I inquired about where stepdad was, and Carrie explained that a few days earlier, Mom and stepdad had gotten into a huge row, and he had since moved into a hotel somewhere. As we followed her down the hall, I couldn't help but notice that our family photos, which were once proudly displayed on the walls, were now scattered on the floor or even smashed. When we entered Mom's bedroom, we found her half watching a TV show. She glanced over at me and slurred something along the lines of, "Well, if it isn't my only daughter," in a manner so muddled by her slurred speech that it was almost impossible to understand. Carrie quickly hushed me, saying not to pay attention because Mom had been out of it for the last hour, uttering bizarre statements. I asked Carrie if Mom was drunk, and she replied that she wasn't entirely sure, though she did mention that Mom had had some wine earlier. Apparently, Mom had started spouting nonsensical comments, and then, out of nowhere, she began screaming about broken families being stuck in the picture frame, which explained the mess in the hallway. As I was questioning Carrie further, my fiancé decided to call the emergency line to request an ambulance for Mom. He asked Carrie if Mom was on any medication, and that's when we learned that Mom was prescribed something for anxiety and depression, a fact that had escaped my attention until now. Even though I'd known about her anxiety issues in passing. After getting off the phone with the emergency line, Carrie quickly gathered Mom's medications so we could bring them along when the paramedics arrived. At the same time, my fiancé tried repeatedly to contact stepdad. I asked Carrie if she had reached out to our other sister, but she said no, not wanting to add more stress for either her or the baby. In a moment of rare candor, she admitted that she now realized I was right all along when I had warned her that stress could affect a pregnancy, though she had been too stubborn to admit it before. Sensing that now was not the time to argue, I kept my mouth shut. Eventually, the paramedics arrived. Just as they were preparing to take Mom away, she began screaming in hysterics again, yelling something incomprehensible about needing to stay to feed the baby. We all ended up going to the hospital, and after a while, my fiancé managed to get hold of stepdad, who arrived much later. The doctor later explained that the combination of extreme stress from Mom and Dad's constant fighting, mixed with alcohol and her medications, had taken a toll on her. Apparently, Mom had drunk far too much that night, so much so that she became confused and disoriented. The doctor also mentioned that Mom hadn't been taking her medication properly. Physically, she was fine, but out of caution, they decided to keep her in the hospital for a few days to monitor her condition. I haven't been able to visit or see her yet, as I'm waiting for her to be released. Dad was allowed to see her that very night, but even then, he wasn't permitted to stay for long. Regarding the wedding, Carrie later told me while we were driving back home that Laura had texted her a few days prior, stating that I was still slated to be the maid of honor. The decision was final. This revelation led to even more fighting between Mom, Dad, and Carrie, with heated shouting all around. In the days that followed, neither Carrie nor my parents have spoken to Laura, which left me utterly shocked, especially since Laura had never mentioned this decision to me directly. I tried asking Carrie for more details, but she remained silent for most of the drive home. At one point, she even prepared a little speech about how she might never consider me her sister again, expressing deep feelings of betrayal over everything that had transpired. I let her speak, too tired and emotionally drained to argue or say anything more. Since then, I haven't spoken to her, and I'm currently looking into family therapy options for the near future. I plan to contact Mom's doctor to see if he has any suggestions, particularly given the ongoing strain that all of these events have placed on our family. I also relayed everything to Alan, hoping that he could gently explain the situation to Laura without causing her too much stress, advising him to keep it vague by simply stating that Mom was completely fine. What started as wedding planning eventually unspooled into deep-seated family issues that had been bubbling under the surface for a long time. Finally, here is the last update. Laura's wedding did go ahead before the second lockdown, set on our family's sprawling farm with roughly 50 guests in attendance. Despite all the drama, Carrie did wear the dress she had chosen. Laura eventually caved to her demands, and even donned the tiara she picked out mere days before the event. In the aftermath, Carrie took to Facebook to post statuses directed at me, claiming things like, "I can't believe my own family would be so toxic and bully me," which ultimately led me to block her. Truthfully, nothing wildly outlandish happened on the wedding day. Carrie did get drunk and attempted to sing and dance, trying desperately to steal the spotlight, but nothing went so far as to completely shut me out. Whenever I entered a room, she would announce that she couldn't stand being around negative energy, and then she would leave, dragging her boyfriend along with her. In a surprising twist, her boyfriend later proposed to her and texted me, pleading for me to try to reconcile and help with the wedding planning. I apologized and explained that, while I still considered him a friend, I simply couldn't have Carrie in my life at the moment. He replied with an apology of his own, expressing hope that someday we could reconcile. Since then, I haven't spoken to Carrie in months. Laura, on the other hand, is doing well, and we still keep in touch. As for Mom and my stepdad, they've remained silent, and I've been keeping my distance too. I even removed all of them from my Facebook. Still, Laura has made sure to keep me updated on any developments. Although there hasn't been anything extremely exciting since then, I wanted to share my story in its entirety and thank everyone for the overwhelming support and advice during these turbulent times. Every moment of this journey has been raw and unfiltered, and while the family drama is far from over, I appreciate you sticking with me through every twist and turn of this chaotic saga. If you have any further advice, words of wisdom, or simply need to share your own experiences, please leave a comment below. Your support means everything to me, and I look forward to hearing from you.